Hi guys, I just had an interesting conversation with Luke Stanley about motion guidelines. And Luke is an awesome guy. Aside the fact that he's also very knowledgeable about this, it was really insightful, and I can't wait for you to watch the video. So this video is in three parts, and this is the final part. When it comes to communicating or collaborating with the brand, what roles or skill sets or let's say stakeholder is necessary to talk with to properly implement the guidelines? That's from you now, having created, and now you have to deliver. Even before creating now, who do you need to properly communicate with to ensure that you create the right thing for the brand?
So in terms of like who I'm usually in touch with at the start, or if someone gets in touch with me or I've started connecting with someone, it's usually the creative or design director of a brand. They're usually the ones that are kind of in a position where they can see the potential of it. I think that's part of it, is you want to speak to someone who can, who can see the opportunity and the value that emotion guidelines or systems bring. And they are also usually who you work with as well, quite often. Unless there are brands sometimes that even have motion directors as well. But most of the time it's been creative and design directors that I collaborate with. Sometimes it started off with speaking to a key stakeholder or a founder of a company. But usually if it is, that it's again, there's someone who has a really good understanding of brand and marketing and creative to be able to kind of, have that conversation with. So usually in terms of like, if you're looking for opportunities and stuff, they're the people to sort of go for, really, is to speak to, is like, the creative and design directors, because they're the ones who will then probably take it forward to their stakeholders to say, I feel we should be doing this and working out, if it's going to work for budgets and so on. But then they're also going to probably be who you'll work with and collaborate with throughout the project, because it is a collaboration. It's not just a case of I go away and do everything and then I'm just like, what do you think? It's really getting their input and understanding. And there's a lot of value that they bring, obviously, because they know their brand inside out. So there's a lot of things that they bring to the table and ideas as well, which is really cool, because I think, like, at the end of the day, I think the best creative projects are when you're collaborating and there's more than one person involved. There's, other people with, different ideas that are coming in. And so there's been plenty of projects where there's definitely been some great ideas that the creative directors have led on in terms of like what to do with certain elements and content and motion decisions and stuff like that. That have been really great. So, but they're the sort of main ones, in simple terms, is design and creative directors.
This ones are towards motion designers. What additional skill set do you think motion designers need to have in order to properly create guidelines? They are already motion designers. They know their onions when it comes to that, but I don't know. They need what other things think they would need to add to that?
I think the main learning curve is trying to generally have a more strategic approach. I think the honesty about this kind of space of doing motion guidelines and motion systems is it's very much creating ideas that will reflect the brand the best, but it's also like trying to find the concepts and ideas that work well in terms of how you can implement it as a system. So I think it's being aware that you can't always go with the most complicated idea, because it's not going to work in terms of helping people implement it across different, content and so on. And that doesn't mean you have to make everything really simple, but I think it's just kind of having the idea and the mindset of how is this practically going to work and how are we practically going to be able to implement this as a system, as well as also the choices you're making with motion. How are you strategically thinking about that? And thinking about it more in terms of at brand level, how is this reflecting the brand? And then it is kind of going into that it's going to be new to people who have never done anything like this before. About like doing documentation is quite a sort of very different thing in terms of detailing all the kind of choices and stuff that you've made, but also kind of how you do that, and also that you're kind of selecting certain easing curves for certain animations. Like I said earlier, it's usually a case of when you're building, a minute long explainer video, you're basically just going to be using the easing curves that best work for that animation. But whereas this is thinking, more in terms of not only one piece of content, but how that brand uses it across many different types of pieces of content. So I'd say those are the things that are maybe different from what they would be doing on a regular basis.
Okay. Sounds good. Can you run through a couple of tools you use for the entire process? That's from, if you use any additional tool, from strategy points right down to documentation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I do all my strategy work in FigJam and Figma. I just find that usually easiest to use, partly just because it's a great place just to be able to dump all the ideas and all the notes and so on. But also almost every brand I'm working with, they're using Figma. So you know that they're also going to just be comfortable jumping on there. So I start off with doing, all the sort of strategy and audit stuff. Everything is all on there so they can access that too. And then in terms of like doing presentations and documentation, currently, the tool that I use is actually a presentation tool called pitch.com, which I've been using for like the last year and a half. I was recommended actually by another branding studio. And the reason I use it is just because it is very simple to use, but it supports animation well in terms of just being able to dump in examples of animations, and literally it will work really well on there because it's all cloud-based. You can just right-click on it and say autoplay, or if you want it to loop, and all those kind of things, and just like all the sort of key things that you'd want. Unfortunately, a lot of brands use Google Slides still, which usually, once I've worked with them, they do usually, they can often ask, can you put that documentation you've done in pitch.com into Google Slides? But I always use pitch.com just because it's the easiest thing to use to make sure everything's put together. But anyway, I also use that just for like presenting throughout the project when I'm doing checkpoints of certain stages and stuff as well. So like when I've done my testing, I throw my animations in there so I can just work through that as a presentation to be able to show what I've been working on. And for them to obviously give feedback. And then I obviously, at the moment, I'm still using After Effects. I think it's an interesting conversation at the moment because I am wondering about whether there are going to be animation tools that people start moving to away from After Effects. At the moment, it's still, for me, the one I'm using. There are others I'm considering, but it's sort of early stages at the moment, so I can't sort of really give a full sort of reference to sort of saying to use those. After Effects, though, obviously every motion designer uses After Effects, I imagine, and so that's what I use to build everything in. And then in terms of like, sometimes with clients, they just want everything set up in After Effects in terms of all the templates and all the animations, and just making sure they're all nicely organized and naming your layers, as Ben Marriott always says, labeling all your sort of folders and so on, and that kind of thing. Just making sure it's all really organized so that someone can go in there and use it. But then the other thing is obviously if the motion is being used by video teams a lot for the brand as well, then it's enabling Mogut so that they can do changes in Premiere as well. So I do have that request sometimes. So it's 50-50. Sometimes I'm asked to do Mogus and sometimes I just want everything in After Effects. But I think my suggested recommendation would be just keep an eye on new tools though, because I think I'm beginning to see that there are certain animation tools and I'm wondering if they're going to start solving some sort of good problems for motion designers in terms of this kind of space, because I think it is it's still quite a sort of, it's something where it works if there are motion designers at a brand, but if there's other teams that are wanting to be involved in sort of, creating content and stuff, using After Effects really sort of alienates them really in terms of accessibility. And I think it's interesting that there are some other platforms. One of which I would say is Fable. I think is one that I would keep an eye on. I think they're doing some really interesting stuff. And they're really sort of looking at this area of templates, and so I think I would keep an eye on them. But I also wouldn't. I would imagine there's going to be more soon that are going to kind of be giving After Effects some competition. But After Effects, at the end of the day, that can do the most in terms of an animation tool. It's still a brilliant tool. I don't want to put down After Effects at all, but I do feel it's not the most accessible tool. And I think there are some new softwares coming out that are going to start potentially solving the issues that I maybe would love After Effects to update to. So, But anyway, so Figma, FigJam, Pitch.com, and After Effects are my main tools.
Thank you so much, Luke. I really appreciate you. Any last words you'd like to give before going to anyone who's probably going to listen to this?
I think in terms of if there's something you're interested to explore, I think I would just recommend starting off by doing a tester project. That was what I did, because I think that will give you an idea of if it's something you want to do. I think it is for certain types of people in terms of the work you end up doing. It won't be for everyone. So I think that would be my recommendation, is just either make up a brand or find a brand. I did one for Unsplash. That was the first one that I kind of threw onto LinkedIn and kind of started the journey really. But they were obviously a brand that weren't using Motion at all, so I thought that was a good one just to sort of test it out and see what they could do if they did use Motion, and then try the ideas out of what it would take to make a Motion guideline for them. So I think that would be my recommendation, is basically if you're thinking about it, I think just start trying to give it a go and see if it's something that appeals to you, and then taking it from there. Would be my advice for anyone thinking about it.
Thank you so much, Luke. I really do appreciate your time, and it's been insightful talking to you on this topic. And I actually look forward to us doing this sometime soon in the future.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thanks so much, Kev. Really appreciate you inviting me on.
Thank you so much. Talk soon.